The room smelled of old money and newer desperation. Lord Edmund Callistus sat across the table from Alessandro Varelli, with the specific posture of a man who had arrived at a negotiation already knowing he had lost, and was simply determining the terms of the losing. His hands were flat on the table. His eyes moved between Alessandro's face and the document in front of him with the rapid calculation of someone doing arithmetic that keeps producing the wrong answer. Alessandro did not look at the document. He was looking at the room. The Callistus drawing room was large and had been expensive once. The furniture was good quality and old enough that the quality showed through the wear rather than being concealed by it. The paintings on the walls were real. The chandelier above them was real. But the carpet had not been replaced in years, and the curtains carried the specific fading of fabric that had been in direct sunlight too long without anyone noticing. This was a family that had been spending the inheritance rather than replenishing it for at least a generation. Alessandro knew this because Alessandro knew everything about the people he did business with before he sat across a table from them. Edmund Callistus had borrowed $2 million from the Varelli organization 14 months ago at terms that had seemed manageable at the time, and had compounded in the specific way that debt compounds when the person carrying it is not the kind of person who manages money well. The debt was now $3.4 million. Edmund could not pay it. The property in the north, Edmund said. I have assessed it and the current valuation. I own 3 properties in the north, Alessandro said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. His voice operated at one consistent register in these rooms, the register of a man who has already decided and is allowing the other person to reach the same conclusion in their own time. I do not need a 4th. Edmund's hands moved on the table. The investment portfolio is worth approximately $600,000, Alessandro said. We are discussing $3.4 million. I am not interested in doing this in installments, Edmund. I am interested in closing this account. The room was quiet. Edmund looked at the document in front of him. Alessandro had been aware of the girl since he entered the room. She was standing near the far window, partially behind the curtain, in the specific position of someone who had been told to wait there, and was doing so with the composed patience of someone accustomed to waiting. She was not looking at the table. She was not looking at him. She was looking out the window at the garden below with the expression of a woman who has separated herself from what is happening in the room by the simple mechanism of deciding it is not happening to her. Alessandro had been in many rooms where debts were discussed and assets assessed. He had seen many things offered across tables in these rooms. He had learned to read the specific quality of desperation that produced each category of offer before the offer was spoken. He looked at Edmund Callistus. Edmund was not looking at the document anymore. He was looking at the girl by the window. Alessandro understood immediately what was coming. She is 22, Edmund said. His voice had changed. The negotiating register was gone. What replaced it was the specific flatness of a man saying something he has already separated himself from emotionally, because the alternative is feeling it. Educated. Capable. No encumbrances. She would be an asset to any household requiring a competent. She is your daughter, Alessandro said. She is a debt instrument, Edmund said. In the current circumstances. The girl by the window had not moved. She was still looking at the garden. Her hands were at her sides. Her posture had not changed. Alessandro looked at her. She turned then. She looked directly at him across the room with the gray eyes of a woman who had known this conversation was coming, and had made her peace with it in the way you make peace with weather. You do not argue with it. You simply determine how to move through it. Their eyes met. She looked at him with no plea in her expression. No performance of suffering designed to influence his decision. Simply the direct, level gaze of a person presenting themselves to be assessed and refusing to participate in the pretense that the assessment was anything other than what it was. Alessandro looked at Edmund. The debt will be considered settled, he said. My people will be in contact about the transition arrangements. He stood. He picked up his jacket. He walked to the door. He did not look at the girl again. But at the door he stopped. He did not turn around. What is her name? He said. Eva, Edmund said. Alessandro walked out. Behind him in the drawing room. He heard nothing from the direction of the window. No sound. No protest. No breaking. Only silence. The silence of a woman who had just been sold by her father to a mafia king, and had decided that silence was the correct response because everything else would cost her something she intended to keep. The Virelli estate had 40 rooms. Ava had cleaned 37 of them in the first 3 weeks. Not because she was required to clean all of them. Because she had understood in her first 48 hours that the way to survive in this house was to be useful in ways that were visible and present in spaces that were informative. A woman with a cloth and a bucket could move through most of a large house without drawing the kind of attention that a woman standing still in a corridor would draw. She learned the house. She learned its rhythms. She learned its people. The people were more important than education. Alessandro had 3 siblings. Damon, the eldest after Alessandro, who drove a car that cost more than most people's houses and who arrived at the estate approximately once a week to discuss what he consistently referred to as his investment opportunities, all of which required Alessandro's capital and none of which had apparently ever produced a return. Celeste, the middle sister, whose credit cards Alessandro paid, and whose lifestyle Alessandro funded with the specific resigned consistency of someone who had stopped expecting the situation to change. And the youngest Reed, 24 years old, who had been extracted from 3 separate legal situations in the past 2 years by Alessandro's lawyers at Alessandro's expense. Beyond the siblings there were cousins, a constellation of them, arriving and departing with a regularity of people who knew the door was always open and had concluded from this that it was always open specifically for them. Ava watched all of this. She watched from the position of someone who was functionally invisible in this house. Not because she was treated cruelly. Because she was treated as furniture, present and functional, and not requiring acknowledgement. She moved through rooms and heard conversations that were not adjusted for her presence because she had been assessed and filed in the category of a person whose understanding of the conversation was irrelevant. This was useful. She saw Alessandro in these rooms most clearly when he did not know she was watching. He was not the man she had expected. She had expected the coldness she had seen in the drawing room, the mechanical efficiency of a transaction. She found instead a man who was cold in the specific way of someone who had learned to be cold because the alternative had been repeatedly punished. She watched him sit across the table from his siblings and extend help with the expression of a man doing mathematics rather than feeling. She watched his hands on his desk late at night when he thought the house was empty, pressed flat against the surface, a gesture she recognized as the physical equivalent of holding yourself together. She had seen her own hands do this. She confronted him on a Thursday morning. She was cleaning his office. He was at his desk, already there when she arrived, earlier than she had expected. She moved through the room quietly and efficiently, and she was almost done when she stopped. She had watched him for 3 weeks. She had assessed. She had concluded. "They are eating you alive," she said. He looked up from the document he was reading. She kept her eyes on the shelf she was dusting. "Your brother arrives every week with a new project. Your sister's cards are declined, and you replace the limit. Your youngest brother has a court appearance next month that I heard discussed in the corridor. You sit at this desk at 11 in the evening and press your hands flat on the surface." She set down the cloth. She looked at him directly. "You are not running an empire," she said. "You are running a feeding operation. And they are not grateful. They are simply hungry." Alessandro looked at her. The expression on his face was not anger. It was the expression she had seen on his face in unobserved moments, the one underneath the cold efficiency, the one that looked briefly like a man who has been told something true and is determining whether he can afford to acknowledge it. "You are here to clean," he said. "Not to offer observations." "I am here because my father sold me to pay a debt," she said. "That gives me a particular perspective on what people are worth to the people who claim to value them." She picked up her cloth. She finished the shelf. She walked out. In the corridor, she breathed carefully and considered whether she had just made a serious error. She heard, from behind the closed office door, the sound of something being set down on a desk. Hard. Once. Then silence. She walked back to her duties. The board meeting was on a Friday morning, and Ava knew something was wrong before anyone else did. She knew because she had been watching Alessandro for 6 weeks, and she had developed the specific literacy of someone who has studied a person carefully enough to read the small signals that precede the large ones. The slight tightening around his left eye that had been present for 3 days. The way he had been pressing his temples during the Tuesday evening meal. The color of his skin in the corridor light that morning. Not quite right, the specific gray underbrown of someone whose body is working harder than it should be. She was in the corridor outside the boardroom when she heard the sound. Not a dramatic sound. A single chair scraping back fast. Then voices, several at once. Then the specific urgent quality of people responding to something that had not been planned. She walked to the door. Alessandro was on the floor. The board members were around him, some standing, 2 crouching, 1 already on a phone. The room had the controlled chaos of people managing a situation none of them had prepared for. Eva walked in. She moved through the standing board members with the focused directness of someone who had already assessed the situation and determined what needed doing. She crouched beside him. He checked his pulse. He checked his breathing. She looked at the color of his lips and the movement of his chest, and she made the rapid clinical assessments of a woman who had spent 2 years as a hospital volunteer before her father's debts had produced a different kind of education. He is breathing, she said. Pulses fast and weak. He needs an ambulance now, not in 5 minutes. One of the board members was already calling. Alessandro's eyes were half open. He was not unconscious. He was somewhere between the specific half-present state of a body that has stopped cooperating with a mind running it. He looked at her. She looked at him. "You're going to be all right," she said. Her voice was steady. Not performed steadiness. The actual steadiness of a woman who was frightened and had decided that her fear was not useful in this moment, and had set it aside accordingly. He said nothing. The ambulance came in 8 minutes. She rode with him. Not because anyone asked her to. Because she got in and no one stopped her, and when the paramedics looked at her she answered their questions about his recent symptoms with the specific accuracy of someone who had been paying careful attention. In the hospital corridor outside the assessment room she sat in a plastic chair, and she pressed her own hands flat on her knees and she breathed. She thought about her father's drawing room. About the window and the garden and the level gaze she had offered a man who was buying her. She thought about 6 weeks of watching Alessandro Varelli press his hands flat on his desk at 11 in the evening in an empty office. She thought, he is going to be very badly informed about how many people in that house actually care whether he lives. She was right. The family arrived in the 3rd hour. She watched them from the plastic chair. She watched the conversations that happened in the corridor when they thought they were private. She watched Damon on the phone. Not with a doctor, with someone discussing assets. She watched Celeste crying with a specific performance of a woman who has concluded that visible grief is the appropriate presentation and is delivering it accordingly. She watched Reed standing near the coffee machine scrolling through his phone. She watched all of this and she felt something cold settle in her chest that was not hatred. It was the specific sorrow of having your worst assessment confirmed. The diagnosis came the next morning. End-stage renal failure. The nephrologist explained it with the patient clarity of a doctor who has delivered this category of news before and understands that the people receiving it need precision more than comfort. The kidneys were failing. The rate of failure was advanced. Without a transplant, the prognosis was measured in months. He needs a donor, the nephrologist said. We will begin compatibility testing with family members immediately. Ava sat in the back of the room. She looked at the family. She looked at Alessandro in the hospital bed, looking at the ceiling with the expression of a man reorganizing his understanding of his own future. She thought about what was coming. She was not surprised by what came. They failed one by one. Not all of them dishonestly. Damon had a genuine blood pressure condition that the medical team determined made donor surgery genuinely inadvisable. This was real. Ava believed it because she had watched Damon for 6 weeks, and he was many things, but he was not, she thought, capable of fabricating a medical condition. The others were less straightforward. Celeste discovered, with the convenient timing of someone who had been looking for a reason to discover it, a family history of kidney complications that she had apparently been unaware of until 48 hours after the compatibility testing began. The medical team noted this carefully in the file. Reed's results came back as incompatible. The nephrologist reviewed the results twice. He did not share his conclusions about their accuracy. The cousins cited various conditions, various complications, various reasons that arrived with a specific uniformity of people who had compared notes before presenting them. Within a week, the hospital room had developed the quality that Ava had anticipated. The visits became shorter, the calls less frequent. The corridor conversations she had watched in the first days faded away as the family determined that extended presence at the hospital was not producing the return they had been hoping for and redistributed their time accordingly. Alessandro knew. She could see that he knew. He lay in the hospital bed and looked at the ceiling, and his face had the expression of a man completing an accounting exercise he had been avoiding for years and finding that the numbers, now that he was finally looking at them, were exactly as bad as he had always suspected. She came every day. Not because anyone expected her to. She was a woman who had been acquired as a debt settlement and assigned domestic duties at an estate where the principal resident was now in a hospital room. Her presence at the hospital was not required by anyone. She came because she had assessed the situation and concluded that he should not be alone in that room. She changed his 4-drip when the nurses were occupied elsewhere. She brought him water. She sat in the chair beside the bed and read from the book she was currently working through, and did not require him to perform conversation or gratitude or anything else. He watched her. She knew he was watching. She did not comment on it. On the 9th day he said, "Why are you here?" She looked up from the book. "Because the room should not be empty," she said. "I bought you," he said. The words came out flat. Not as an accusation. As a statement of fact, he found it relevant to the question. "Yes," she said. "And you are here anyway." He looked at the ceiling. "I do not understand that," he said. "I know," she said. She went back to her book. She stayed until 9 that evening. She took the bus back to the estate. She went to the small room in the staff quarters, and she lay on the narrow bed, and she looked at the ceiling, and she thought about what she was going to do. She already knew what she was going to do. She had known since the 3rd day of testing when the family members began finding their reasons. She made an appointment with the nephrologist the following morning. The results came back in 4 days. Perfect compatibility. The nephrologist looked at the results and then looked at her with the careful expression of a doctor, making sure the person across the desk understood the full scope of what they were considering. "You understand this is major surgery," he said. "Donor surgery carries its own risks. Recovery is significant. You would be giving one of your kidneys to." "Understand," she said. "Ms. Callistus, you are not a family member. You are under no obligation." "I understand that also," she said. He looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at the results again. "The compatibility is exceptional," he said. "In medical terms, this is the best possible result for Mr. Varelli. Schedule the surgery," she said. Alessandro found out 2 days later. She was in the room when the nephrologist told him. She had not planned to be there. She had come to bring him water, and the doctor had arrived while she was still in the room, and she had decided that leaving would be more conspicuous than staying. She stood near the window with the water in her hand, and she watched Alessandro's face as the doctor explained. His face did several things. The controlled professional expression. Then something underneath it breaking through briefly. Then the rapid reassembly of a man who has been managing his own reactions for so long that the management is almost automatic. He looked at her. "Leave us," he said to the doctor. The nephrologist left with the specific tact of a man who understood that the conversation about to happen was not a medical conversation. Alessandro looked at her across the hospital room. "Why," he said. She set the water on the table beside his bed. "Because I know what it is," she said, "to be something people discard when the cost of keeping you becomes inconvenient." She looked at him steadily. "I watched your family find their reasons. I watched the room go empty." He paused. "I will not let you die so they can celebrate your funeral and divide your estate. I treated you as property," he said. "Yes," she said. "I took you from your home. My father sold me from my home," she said. "You completed a transaction. There is a difference. A difference that benefits me considerably more than it benefits you." Most differences do, she said. That is the nature of the world you operate in. She sat in the chair beside his bed. I am not doing this for you, Alessandro. I am doing it because I will not be the person who watches someone die when I could stop it. That is simply who I am. He paused. I have been many things in the past year. I would like to remain that. He looked at her. She looked back. They will try to stop it, he said. Family. They will say you are manipulating me. Positioning yourself for the will. I know, she said. Are you? She looked at him without expression. I have a perfect kidney, she said. You have none that function. That is the complete extent of what I am offering you. You can determine the rest of the arithmetic yourself. He was quiet for a long time. The surgery is scheduled, he said. Day after tomorrow, she said. If you consent. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at his hands. He looked at the empty chairs in the room where his family had sat for diminishing amounts of time across the previous 2 weeks. All right, he said. She nodded. He stood. She was at the door when he said, Ava. He stopped. Thank you, he said. The 2 words came out with a specific difficulty of someone who does not say them often and means them completely. She stood at the door for a moment. Rest, she said. You need your strength. She walked out. The surgery lasted 6 hours. Ava was in the operating room for 4 of them. Then she was not, because her body made its own decision about the limits of what it would cooperate with, and the medical team made their decisions accordingly. She woke in recovery to a ceiling she did not immediately recognize and a pain in her side that was precise and informative about exactly what had happened and where. A nurse told her the surgery had gone well, that the recipient was in recovery, that she had done very well and needed to rest. She closed her eyes. She thought about nothing specific. The specific blankness of a body that has been through something significant and is currently occupied entirely with the business of existing and does not have resources available for additional processing. She slept. When she woke the second time, the light in the room was different, and the pain was the same, but she was more present inside it and capable of thinking alongside it rather than simply within it. Alessandro was alive. She knew this because the nurse had told her and because she had developed, across the months of watching him, a specific awareness of his presence in spaces that was reliable enough that she would have known if he were gone from the world even before anyone told her. She lay in the recovery room and she breathed and she thought about what she had done. Not with regret. She did not feel regret. She had made the decision with complete clarity and she lived inside it with the same clarity. What she felt was something more complex than regret and more honest than certainty. She felt the particular exhaustion of a woman who has spent a year being strong in circumstances that did not reward strength and who has just given a piece of herself to a man she had every reason to resent and found, in the giving, that the resentment had been the least interesting thing she was carrying. She had been angry at Alessandro. She was less angry than she had been. Not because he had done nothing to earn the anger. Because somewhere between the office confrontation and the hospital room and the 8 days of watching the chairs go empty, she had looked at the king everyone feared and found a man who pressed his hands flat on his desk at 11 in the evening in an empty office and did not know how to ask for help from anyone. That man had taken a piece of her. She would live with the taking. She had made her peace with it. She closed her eyes. She slept. He came to her room before he went anywhere else. She knew this because Priya, the housekeeper who had been kind to her since the first week, told her. Alessandro had arrived back at the estate in the wheelchair the medical team had required for transport. The family had gathered in the main foyer. His siblings, his cousins, the constellation of people who had found their reasons during the testing period, and were now reassembled with the specific brightness of people who understand that a near miss with mortality sometimes produces generosity in the person who survived it. He had looked at them. He had turned the wheelchair and gone to the staff quarters. He had knocked on her door. She had been sitting up in the narrow bed with her book and her side still pulling with every deep breath. She said, "Come in." He came in. He sat in the doorway of the small room in his wheelchair, and he looked at her in her narrow bed in the staff quarters, and he said nothing for a long time. He looked at the room, at the single window, at the small shelf with her 3 books and the glass of water and the lamp. "You live here," he said. "Yes," she said. He looked at the room for another moment. I have never been in this part of the house, he said. I know, she said. He looked at her. She looked back. How are you? He said. The question came out slightly awkward. The awkwardness of a man asking a question he is not practiced in asking. Healing, she said. The pain is manageable. The doctors say you had complications. Briefly, she said. They resolved. He looked at his hands in his lap. The hands of a man who ran an empire and had recently been unable to do so. Hands that were capable and experienced, and currently resting in a wheelchair in a small staff room in his own house. I owe you my life, he said. You owe me nothing, she said. I made a choice. The choice cost you. The choice was mine to make, she said. The cost was mine to calculate. I did the arithmetic. I proceeded. She looked at him. That is how choices work. He was quiet. My family, he said. They are in the foyer. I know, she said. They did not come to see me in hospital for the last 11 days, he said. I know that too, she said. And yet they are in the foyer. They are in the foyer, she said, because you survived. If the surgery had failed, they would have been at the estate regardless, but for different reasons and with a lawyer. He looked at her. She met his gaze. You see very clearly, he said. I have had good reason to develop the habit, she said. He sat in the doorway of her small room for a long time. She did not rush him. She had learned that Alessandro needed time to sit inside things, and that rushing him produced the cold efficiency rather than the man underneath it. What do I do? He said. The question was genuine. She understood this immediately. Not a rhetorical exercise. Not a performance of humility. A man who had spent his life making decisions at speed and with certainty asking a question he genuinely did not know the answer to. You go back to the foyer, she said. You look at them. Not with anger. With clarity. And you make decisions that reflect what you actually know now rather than what you chose to believe before. He looked at her for one more moment. Then he turned the wheelchair. He went back to the foyer. She heard it from the corridor. Not because she was listening. Because Alessandro's voice, when it carried the specific register of a man who has made permanent decisions and is communicating them without equivocation, carried through walls. He was not shouting. He never shouted. He spoke at the same consistent volume he always used, and the weight of it was in the words rather than the delivery, and the words were precise and complete and left no room for the interpretation that people find when they are looking for an exit from accountability. He told Damon that the investment arrangement was concluded, that the weekly transfers would stop, that Damon was a grown man with resources, and the period of supplementation was finished. He told Celeste that her credit accounts with the Varelli organization were closed effective immediately, and that the property she occupied, which was under the Varelli Estates holding company, would be transferred to her name with a 1-year transition period, after which it would be her responsibility. He told Reed that the legal team had handled his last situation and would not be handling any future situations, and that this information was being communicated now so that Reed could arrange his affairs accordingly. He told the cousins, in a sentence that covered the group, that the Varelli estate was not a communal resource, and that future visits should be preceded by an invitation which would be extended if and when he had reason to extend one. Then there was silence. Then voices. Several at once. The specific quality of people who have not processed what they have heard and are attempting to produce a response that will reverse it. Alessandro's voice again. Shorter this time. Pacific. Final. Then footsteps. Ava moved back from the corridor entrance as Alessandro came through in the wheelchair. He looked at her without surprise. He had known she was there. You heard, he said. Yes, she said. Was it the right thing? She thought about the family in the foyer behind him. About Damon's weekly projects, Celeste's replaced credit limits, Reed's extracted legal situations, and the cousins and the feeding operation she had described in his office in the second week. It was the accurate thing, she said. Right and accurate are sometimes the same. In this case, I think they are. He looked at her. You said he began when you first spoke to me in the office. You said I was in a cage. Yes, she said. What did you mean? She looked at him in the wheelchair. The king everyone feared, reduced by illness and returned by sacrifice, sitting in his own corridor, asking a question about a cage. I meant, she said, that you built an empire to be powerful and spent that power keeping people comfortable who would not have kept you comfortable in return. That is not power. That is a more expensive version of the same trap my father was in. He paused. The trap of believing that provision is the same as being valued. He looked at her for a long time. You are not afraid of me, he said. No, she said. Everyone is afraid of me. Everyone who needs something from you, she said. I needed nothing from you. I still need nothing from you. That is possibly why I can see you clearly. The attack came on a night when the estate was running on reduced security. This was not a coincidence. Alessandro's recovery period had been noted by people whose business it was to note the vulnerabilities of powerful men, and the Marchetti organization, which had been watching the Varelli operation for 18 months, had concluded that a man in a wheelchair with a depleted staff and a family no longer invested in his survival was as close to exposed as Alessandro Varelli was ever going to be. Ava heard it first. She was awake. Her side still woke her sometimes in the early hours when she moved incorrectly in sleep, and the healing tissue sent a reminder. She was sitting at her small window in the staff quarters, looking at the dark garden, when she saw the lights at the perimeter. Not the estate's lights. Moving lights. Low and deliberate. She was in Alessandro's room in 40 seconds. He was already awake. He had heard something too. The specific alertness of a man whose body had spent years in dangerous spaces was not entirely diminished by illness and a wheelchair. How many? He said. I saw 4 lights at the eastern perimeter, she said. There will be more. He reached for his phone. His security team would respond, but the response took time, and time in a situation like this was the variable that determined everything. The tunnels, he said. Behind the library. There is a panel behind the 3rd bookcase from the left. It leads to the gatehouse on the northern edge. She looked at him. He looked at her. Cannot move quickly, he said. The acknowledgement came out with the specific difficulty of a man for whom that sentence was the hardest sentence in his vocabulary. You will have to lead. She found the panel. She got him through it. The tunnel was narrow and low-lit, and she moved through it with Alessandro's wheelchair at her back and the sounds of the estate above them and her side pulling with every step, and she did not stop. He did not say anything that was not operationally necessary. She did not say anything at all. She focused on the path, on the distance, on the specific quality of listening to the sounds above them and determining whether they were approaching or receding. They were 20 meters from the gatehouse exit when the tunnel split. She stopped. She looked at the 2 directions. Right, Alessandro said. She went right. She got them to the gatehouse. She got him through the door. She closed it behind them. She stood with her back against the door and breathed and looked at the man in the wheelchair in the small room, and he looked back at her, and the specific silence of people who have just moved through something dangerous together settled around them. Your side, he said. He was looking at her hand, which had moved automatically to her left side. It is fine, she said. You are holding it. It is fine, she said again. Your people. He was already on the phone. His security team arrived in 11 minutes. The Marchetti people were contained in 22. The estate was cleared in 40. She sat on the floor of the gatehouse with her back against the wall and her knees drawn up and her hand on her side, and she breathed carefully and listened to Alessandro managing his people through the phone with the specific authority of a man who had returned to himself in the specific circumstances that called him back. When it was over, he looked at her on the floor. You stood in front of me, he said. She thought about the moment in the tunnel when she had heard the movement above them and had moved between Alessandro's wheelchair and the sound. Yes, she said. Why? She looked at him. 'Cause you have my kidney, she said. I have a vested interest in your continued health. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he almost smiled. She had not seen that before. She noted it. He burned the contract on a morning in early spring. She did not know he was going to do it. He had not told her. He came to the staff quarters at 8 in the morning with a document in his hand and knocked on her door, and when she opened it, he held it out. She looked at it. She looked at him. You know what this is, he said. She knew. She had seen it once before, briefly, on his desk in the second week. The formal agreement between the Varelli organization and Edmund Callistus. The document that transferred her from one category of asset to another. Yes, she said. I'm going to burn it, he said. I wanted you to be present. She stepped out of the room. They went to the garden. He was using a cane now instead of the wheelchair. The recovery was progressing with the specific efficiency of a body that had received exactly what it needed. She walked beside him at a pace that suited him. They stood in the garden in the early morning light with the dew still on the grass. He took out his lighter. He held the document in one hand and the flame in the other, and he looked at the paper. And then he looked at her. I cannot give you back the year, he said. No, she said. I cannot give you back what your father took from you when he made that decision. No, she said. What I can give you, he said, is the document's absence. And the choice of what comes after it. He touched the flame to the corner of the paper. They watched it burn. She watched the legal language that had defined her existence in this house for 12 months reduce itself to ash and float away on the mild morning air. She thought about her father's drawing room, about the window and the garden and the level gaze she had given a man buying her. She thought about everything between that moment and this one. What do you want? Alessandro said. The document was gone. He was looking at her. Not what is available. Not what is reasonable. What do you want? She looked at the garden. The same kind of garden she had looked at through her father's window on the day everything changed. I want to study, she said. I was accepted to a medical program 2 years ago. He deferred. The deferral has lapsed. He paused. I would like to apply again. Done, he said. Immediately. Without calculation. She looked at him. I want my own space, she said. Not the staff quarters. Done, he said. She was quiet for a moment. And I want, she said carefully, to understand who you are when you are not being the man everyone fears. Because I have seen that man occasionally. In an office at 11 in the evening. In a hospital room. In a gatehouse. She looked at him. I would like to see him more regularly. Alessandro looked at her. She looked back. That, he said, may take longer. Have time, she said. He looked at the ash where the contract had been. I spent my life, he said slowly, building something that I believed would make me powerful enough that nothing could touch me. That no loss could reach me. He paused. I was wrong about all of it. About what power was for. About what I was protecting. About who was worth protecting. She said nothing. She let him say the rest of it. You saw me clearly, he said. From the first week. You walked into my office, and you told me the truth about my own house, and I dismissed you. And then you sat beside my hospital bed and changed my 4-drip. And you were the only person in the room. He looked at his hands. I do not know how to be what you deserve someone to be. I have not practiced it. He looked at her. But I would like to try. If that is something you are willing to permit. The garden was quiet around them. The morning light was the kind that arrives clean and indifferent and illuminates everything equally. She looked at Alessandro Virelli, the Mafia king everyone feared, who had pressed his hands flat on his desk at 11 in the evening in an empty office, who had carried her father's debt to a resolution, carried her lighter to a hospital room, carried her kidney inside him, and gone to her room before the foyer and burned the contract in the garden on a spring morning. Start small, she said. Tell me something true. He looked at the space where the ash had been. I do not know how to ask for help, he said. Have never known. I have always believed that needing something from another person was a form of exposure I could not afford. That, she said, is a very honest beginning. She turned and walked back toward the house. He walked beside her. Not behind her. Beside her. The specific proximity of two people who are not yet certain what they are to each other, but have determined that the distance between them is no longer serving either of them particularly well. She thought about everything that had brought her to this garden. About the transactions and the watching and the hospital and the tunnels and the contract burning in the morning air. She thought about what came next. She did not know exactly what came next. But she was standing in a garden in the early spring light with a man who had just told her something true for the first time. And she had a kidney's worth of investment in his continued existence, and a medical school application to prepare, and her own room in a house that no longer held her by a document. She had been acquired as a debt. She was leaving the debt behind her with the ash. What she was walking toward was something that had no contract, because contracts, she had learned, were for people who were not certain enough of each other to proceed without documentation. She was walking toward something that required only what she had always had: her own eyes, her own mind, her own particular quality of seeing clearly. These were things no one had ever managed to buy. She had kept them through everything. She intended to keep them still. To everyone who has ever been measured by their utility rather than their worth. To everyone who stayed in a room with someone when the room should have been empty. To everyone who gave something real to someone who had not yet learned how to receive it. You were not foolish. You were simply more human than the situation deserved. The cost of that humanity is real. So is its value. If this story reached you, please like, share, and leave a comment below. Tell us which moment stayed with you. Take care of yourselves. We will see you in the next story.